Hello and welcome. It's Melee Stats Deep Dives. You know, guys, we're all stuck in our little houses and can't go outside. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like I'm going mad during the month of March.
Wow. Imagine that.
Imagine
Imagine a bit of madness in
in
March.
March. What does that remind everybody of? Is there anything that we know that reminds anyone of the words March and Madness? Well, let me ask my guest, because we got a good one today, folks. We have you know him from commentating, you know him from being a former top 100 player, you know him from apparently being one of the better players at Anime Music Quiz. I've got Toph on the episode.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, Toph?
Dude, good to finally be on. I'm doing well. I gotta say, I feel like I've been making the most out of, the kind of lockdown situation. We're on shelter in place in California. Went on a hike yesterday. Kind of got to be outside for the first time in a while. That
Sounds like
felt
a
good.
dream.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that does sound good. Like we're all just trying to deal with this at the same time.
hmm
And I really do appreciate you being on the show. You're a first-time guest, of course, so I decided to try to, like, if you were to capture a live animal and put it in a little, like, like a, not a terrarium, but one of those types of things.
Yeah, yeah. And I've been doing a lot of that too in Animal Crossing, by the way.
Yeah, you got to put, like, stuff to remind them of their own environment. So
Right.
if you were to catch a frog, you put, like, grass and something. So to remind you of your own environment, I brought a green fox on to kind of
Perfect.
familiarize yourself. I've got
Uh,
Ambisinister on. What's going on,
What's
Ambi?
up? I'm
hello.
good. I'm doing my best to also not go crazy on the other side of the world from Toph. But we're also shelter in place here in Maryland, and I'm desperately trying to not go crazy.
It
But
is
other than that, doing pretty good.
it is rough. It is a never-ending nightmare that we don't know the end of. But other than that, I really don't think that it's all that bad. So we're talking about March Madness. We have the very popular Melee Madness bracket that we made last year. We did the top 64. We actually did top 70 because there are 4 play-ins. We did the top 64 best Melee moments of all time. And I think we have one. Maybe it's not going to be as popular, but I really think it's more interesting to me myself. We've got Melee Madness this year, which is best upsets of all times.
Yes,
Toph,
I saw that.
Toph, what are your thoughts on this? I saw that you had some thoughts on Twitter.
Yeah, no, I saw. Let me. Should I pull the bracket up or I mean my overall impressions was like for the most part, most of the big tournament upsets that I've remembered. I was like, okay, they better have this on there, and I looked and it was on there.
I feel
So
like
I
an insult's
think
gonna come later. I think you're giving me like a
no,
compliment
no. I
sandwich.
mean, my reply was, if I remember correctly, it was this is Silent Wolf Erasure. Uh, just because,
I
well,
apologize for that. That's
no,
probably
no.
almost entirely my fault. I
It
was like,
totally, it totally starts to turn into like what you value at this point. I will go ahead and plug, or I'll close that loop by saying I do think it's interesting that I think Silent Wolf was the only fox to have a winning record over Mute King's Marth, right?
and I
But
think
then, well, no, I was just gonna say from then it's like how much do you value like matchups and like that sort of like there's so
yeah.
much subjectivity here. We can go on about it forever, which I'm looking forward to doing that exactly that with you guys.
There is an interesting aspect to kind of what we expect to see from certain people, and then how they are viewed in a vacuum. And I think Silent Wolf kind of falls into this weird category of very impressive for his wins versus Mewtwo King, but also he beat him enough where it never really shocked people to the level that maybe
Right.
some of these others
yeah.
did. This is like,
Like that was the big thing for me with Silent Wolf Mewtwo King is like which of like the many Silent Wolf beating Mewtwo King sets do you pick for this particular bracket? Because
yeah,
they're all like, oh yeah, Silent Wolf beat Mewtwo King. Like that's just a very normal result.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's
Globally,
like
it's
what
really
even is an
interesting.
upset?
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
different than, you can look at Amsa Mewtwo King, because that's a pretty high seed on here. Amsa then went on to beat Mewtwo King several more times, but I feel like the initial win, like the initial first win, meant so much. And I don't know if I
Yeah.
could pick out like an individual Silent Wolf set where it's like, this was a huge upset. It's probably just like
Yeah.
he's very good, and that comes with being very good, is that you don't really
Yeah.
get those moments sometimes.
That's a really good point. And I think a lot of it too was the first time, if I remember correctly, the first time he beat him was an off-stream set. It was at Do You Fox With It. And so
Was that the
I,
first
d-
one?
I don't even think it was recorded. So I think that like, that kind of thing influences it too, where like, if one of your biggest upsets happens to be off stream, like fortunately Albert and HBox was recent enough that it's really solid in our memories.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there's a lot of sets like that where there's just, the notoriety factor isn't there because it didn't happen on stream or it wasn't recorded.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's weird that you say that, because I was about to say Albert versus HBox are one of our number one seeds. One of the only sets on here that has not been recorded. Or, yeah, there's that, like, 30-second periscope of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a pretty interesting thing. Eric, did you have any thoughts on, like, anything that you thought we left off? Because I know that you were involved in this, but
I mean,
we are wont to do, Edwin and I take the reins and we don't look back.
I just don't understand why you guys put Zayn on here so often. Like, that's my only real thing. I don't really have any issue with like the ones that got picked, but it's just weird to me that so many of the Zayn sets ended up making it
There's
on here.
what, 2 Zayn sets?
Look how many Plup sets there are, dude. They're deliberately excluded from this list.
Wait, we didn't include Plup. Plup is at that level.
Yes. But is Zayn not at that level?
Zayn's at that level now.
I don't know if you guys realize this. So Zayn Plup is on there, right? The Big House 6 or whatever
That's the
it is.
Big House 6, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys realize this, but that was Plup was Zayn's first top 100 win.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time.
And I include that includes locals.
Does it?
He had never even beaten like Milkman
or like
I don't
Red?
know.
Like he never beat Red?
Red, no. He had yet to beat Red at like a local. Like he had not beaten any top 100 players even within MDVA, which I think is just bonkers.
That is wild.
I think it's so weird. Yeah, I mean, I heard this from Zayn himself. I asked him that. I was like, well, what about locals? He's like, no, I that was my first top 100 win. I was like, that's really weird.
Yeah. I think the
really,
difference,
really weird.
Like, Ambi, to answer your question, the difference between something like Zayn and someone like Plup, or like, yeah, basically like Plup and Leffen were the two people outside the gods who we didn't include upsets from. It just feels like they've been at their level for quite a bit longer than someone like Zayn has.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. And I guess like the early Zayn stuff, just given his like pretty meteoric rise, is pretty hilarious. Like Zayn Plup, for example.
Like, yeah, I believe that Zayn was not top 100 when he beat Plup, and I feel like if we didn't include that, that'd be kind of weird. And I think
definitely
the Zayn Leffen thing, people really like Zayn Leffen, more so the younger crowd, but like he was still losing to. I pulled it up earlier. He was losing to like
Cobalt,
SFAT. Like he was losing to all these Fox players, and he got 3-0'd by Kel's Sheik. It's like it was not a beautiful time for him, but he managed to beat the main man himself.
He got the job done. You guys got to realize too. In particular, I think Ambi. Like when Plup was getting when Zayn was getting good, Zayn got good in like he had like breakout win. Like, okay, still struggling, but breakout win, still struggling. Like, he had, like, big wins.
Yeah,
Plup's rise was a lot more gradual. Like, when Plup was getting good, it was almost like people were, like, he started getting upset before he started getting major upsets himself.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
in the character switch and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Like, when he was getting good, like, I don't remember any huge Plup. It was like, oh, Plup beat this guy. He must be really good. It was more like, oh, okay. It turns out Plup's just placing 13th and 17th at all the majors now, and like, yeah, he's just a good player. And okay, and then that was him for like 2 or 3 years, and then by that time it was like so expected that he would beat people that no one really, it wasn't really like that notable anymore when he beat people. So, yeah, he had a way more gradual rise.
Yeah, I think for something like that kind of hurts. Something like this. And I got another question to ask you guys. So we have been seeing some people who, and just the nature of our audience, they gravitate towards newer results first. And I think that is something that kind of is interesting with people like Zayn Leffen, we mentioned that. How do you think that the history, what we know now from these sets, and the history around the sets, how do you think that's affected it? Like, the fact that Zayn is now favored over Leffen, do you think that hurts something like Zayn Leffen as an upset? If you believe that Zayn is favored over Leffen, I don't know. I don't want to make any super hot takes here.
Maybe in the sense that like you just like look at the bracket, like people are voting on these, right? So people
Yeah.
are gonna look at it and they're gonna gloss over it, right? Because maybe there's a bunch of stuff to vote on, or they're just browsing Twitter and they see Zayn versus Leffen and they're like, that's not an upset, and they click on the other one, right? Without even really thinking about it. Like, yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
I mean, another one's
Yeah.
we had Chudat Mango, which to me was a pretty big upset when it happened at Summit 4 or whatever it was. Summit Spring 2017, as they called it. And then Mango just lost a ton in a row. So it definitely kind of took the sting out of it. But I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I had sort of the opposite feeling of the Chudat Mango one, because that was like during like super Chudat's peak, where he beat all the people that were bad versus Ice Climbers. So I had the opposite, right, for that particular matchup, because that was paired against Zoo Music King, which in my head is just like this legendary moment. And it was just like Chudat at the peak of his power, beating someone that was not that great versus Ice Climbers at the time. So for me, it was like the super opposite. Like I felt like those two were like much closer in skill than they are like would be considered like right now, right?
Yeah,
I think I agree with that.
Sure. I think it's easy to... I don't know. I don't want to act like I know what was happening so well in March 2017. But I feel like for a long time, Mango had that like Icy Slayer role kind of attached to him, and we just never saw it tested. So yeah, I think there's some truth to that, but who knows? Without like being in 2017, I don't know if I can give a very
fair.
accurate... Yeah, whatever. Yeah, so anything else that we kind of see that like maybe... because of the time, Melee 2020 right now makes it look a little weirder.
Let me pull up the bracket again.
Just keep the bracket up.
I'm just going to keep it up.
It's a quality bracket. There's definitely some ones that I think, old school sets or even sets that maybe weren't from a long time ago that kind of get lost to memory and don't even have that old school like clout to them. Like soft over hacks is a really interesting one. I don't know if people talk about that. I don't know if people talk about... Edwin really likes a bait over hacks. Not something I personally care about, but like there's some weird things where I think it's like just old enough where people don't know it and not old enough to get canonized.
Well, bait over hacks was a big deal at the time for sure. But
I think that was
I think a lot of the 16 seeds are really easily swappable with other sets. Like I know a lot of people complain that we didn't have Hybrid or Rosane.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it's just like the same tier as like a lot of other sets that could have possibly made it into this bracket. Like there's like a lot of upsets that happen in this game, right? Like, what 2/3 of the time someone gets upset or something, globally speaking. So it's pretty easy to pick someone to replace any of like the lower seeds. So I didn't really pay too much mind to it for what made it and what ended up not.
I will say, I thought that like the quality of upset started to get really low, like even in the top 64. Like I think these are all great wins for the people who had them, but I imagine like comparing this to comparing with Melee's like almost 20 year of history, comparing this with like Smash 4's 5-year history, I'm sure that their upsets would be so much more wild.
Oh yeah. I mean, Melee is just a more stable game, but that's also why upsets are more special in Melee, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like that is why something like this can be made, because I think that
I think it's more interesting as a result of that.
Like these are special because they don't happen a lot. Yeah,
it's cool that they're like still happening too. Like something like as recent as like Nico over Wizrobe, for example. Is like that's like able to make it into like this sort of list of celebrated upsets, even though it happened like very, very recently. It's kind of cool.
For sure. I mean, like these, a lot. I think the majority of them are from the past 5 years or so, which is part of it. That's our audience, but part of it is also that even as we continue to optimize and we see people have more stable results for the most part, like we still see stuff like this pop up. It's really important to kind of highlight like the grind culture that I think Melee has, because there's upsets here that are one-offs and like I don't think are necessarily indicative of their career, the person who upset them. But a lot of the people who we see here making the upsets end up being pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. That and that's like kind of something that I think sets apart like the lower seeds in the bracket, right, from the higher seeds, is that the lower seeds, like especially like the 16s, like they feel like they were kind of quirky, or they were like, they're like funny to talk about, but like, they don't really feel like part of a larger trend. They feel like little, outliers, right?
Yeah.
Funny footnotes in the history rather
Funny
than like
footnotes. Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think I like that about the seating. I like that that's how they're treated, because I think that's I think that's kind of uh it's more fun to think about melee or melee sets or melee tournaments like such that they're not in a vacuum.
Agreed. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I mean, when you're going on for 20 years, like what we're doing when we play Melee, when we watch Melee and consume Melee content, is like part of the larger story of Melee.
Yeah, definitely.
God, somewhere Edwin Budding's shedding a single tear. The Muck Duck over Westballs one's really funny. I know Europe, some European people who saw that really liked that it was included here. It led me back to the original Twitter thread. Which included Leffen made a tweet complaining about something. Westballs called him a bitch, and then Leffen was like, "You lost to Chew Down and Muck Duck, like you didn't even get to play me." And then Westballs was like, "Well, you're just mad because they beat me and you can't." And
so who is Muck Duck? I actually don't know this one.
This is an interesting story.
This is a great one. I definitely voted for this one over Albert H-Bucks. Just full disclosure.
Before I tell the story of that, I just want to add that what seems like it's like a little bit of a catfight between Leffen and Westballs. Just paint a picture of 2015 Twitter is that Leffen had like 400 likes on all of his tweets, and then Westballs calling him a bitch had like 1.2K.
Yeah.
What a wild world. We wouldn't see that these days, where Leffen's like
so backwards.
It's definitely not what we're seeing in 2020. But yeah, let's talk about Muck Duck versus Westball. So it's Eclipse. I believe that oh my god, do I not know my countries? I really don't remember which European country Eclipse was in, unfortunately. But it was that big tournament that had like Plup, Axe,
yeah.
And a bunch of people getting flown out, so we get to see Westballs.
Eclipse was Norway.
Norway,
yeah.
Brult.
And Axe got third, right?
Yeah,
I remember that.
That was the really close Axe Armada set. But before we can get to like those cool sets like that, we have Westballs plugging in to play a very early match. I don't know if it's like the first round of the tournament or if it's just very early. But he plugs in. He just goes Mewtwo, and he's just kind of messing around. And he is under the guise that this is hand warmers, so he's just kind of messing around. It doesn't really matter. And yeah, Muck Duck is just kind of hitting him, and suddenly the game ends. Westballs has 0 stocks, and Muck Duck says that's 1-0.
Okay, and
Westballs kind of clowns on him the next game, and then there's something weird going on where game 3, Muck Duck says something different than what Westball says about it, but game 3 there is something about the TV turning off at some point.
Really?
There's some like there's people said that Westballs went to the TO. People say that he didn't.
Okay.
He just kind of walked away without saying that. I don't really know. I just know that what happened at the end of the match was that Muck Duck had more stocks 2 games out of the 3.
Wow. And see, this is the kind of thing where if like Wes was like, if he was like a more reliable narrator, I don't even know how to describe. Like, I don't feel like I can I don't feel like I trust Westball. Like Westballs would tweet about it in such a way where I don't feel like I would have a complete picture of what actually happened just based on his tweets.
Right, which is hilarious because it's Westballs versus a completely random person.
Yes, yeah.
Which in 2015,
so game 1 was evidently a hand warmer.
Yes, apparently.
And the TV may have gone off at some point.
The TV might have gone off at some point.
I might just call this. So this is a funny story that like happened to me. That maybe I've told this story on the Scar and Toph show years ago or something. I think most people haven't heard this story, but basically, I was playing. This was at Big House 2, and I was game 3 against Kells. I think this was round 2 of the bracket in losers. Uh, and it was I got Kells down to last stock, and I remember very clearly I was up a stock, and the power went out on our setup,
Oh.
and I was like, what just happened? And I like looked around, and I saw Westballs to like my left, and he like tripped on the power or something. Like he yanked the power out somehow, and he was like, haha, oops. And I was just like, oh my god. And so me and Kels were like, well, what are we gonna do? Blah blah blah. Like I had grabbed him on his last stock or something, and we're like, okay, whatever, like let's just suicide back down to 1 stock and 2 stocks, and we'll just play from there. We do that, and then Kels immediately back throw gives me, and then it's 1 stock apiece, and he goes on to win. And I just remember feeling so deflated, like fucking Westballs.
That's awful.
If he just like maybe this happening, this muck duck shit, maybe that was just karma. If the TV went off, I'm just saying, like the universe has a way to pay you back.
Maybe.
So which Big House was this? Maybe he
Big
got
House
this excuse
2.
from you.
Big
Yeah,
House
maybe
2.
Maybe he got this excuse from you, from
Yeah.
the top.
Yeah, maybe, man. You never know. You really never know. I remember like one of the soft sets I saw, Soft versus Hacks. Was that the set where I know there was a set at Apex too, where the power? It was one of the soft sets where he had to get into top 8. It was either like Ice or Hacks, or it was one of those, and the power went out on him too. So this has happened a couple times.
Yeah, there were a couple of those at Apex. I remember Siren lost to someone, and then he slammed his controller on the table, and it turned the power out on Swift Base Blade Cello.
Oh.
And I remember because I think Blade Cello was winning, and they ended up losing, and like everyone was so mad at Siren. It was so funny.
Let me tell you, having been there, like that even if you SD back down to the stocks, like the momentum.
Yeah, it's
like,
completely different.
It's completely different. Like having been there, oh my god, it's terrible.
I can't imagine what that would be like now if that were on a stream set or like a set that people like in 2020 are really looking forward to.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I mean,
well, what the last time it happened, anything similar to it happened was Left and Shoot At, right? Where the IMO should be replaced. And I mean, that's a meme to this day. Like, you don't live that shit down.
Yeah, that was what, Shine 2017. So that had some years behind it.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, I think everyone remembers it really clear, in spite of the fact that it was 3 years ago.
Yeah. It feels more recent than that, but it was far away.
The funny thing that so we were watching in the Melee Stats Podcast Discord server during the impending quarantine. We're doing this new thing where we're gonna watch along with old top 8s. So we were watching the Big House 4, and the really famous moment where Lucky like drill resets up smash pause.
Yes.
We're watching that in like the 2020 lens, and it's like, man, if that happened right now, that would be a huge thing. Like people would get mad.
I remember people getting mad in Connecticut about that back in the day. They were like, dude, he could have gotten invisible ceiling or whatever.
I remember
like,
some people getting mad.
Understand invisible ceiling. They were like,
invisible
that
ceiling
should be
or
a
like
stock.
slide off or something. Yeah, like if that happened in 2022, people would be up in arms. Maybe it's just because it happened to Westballs. It all comes back to
I'll just stay with it.
Isn't there some stipulation that like, if it kills, like if you pause and the game ends, like from that point with no inputs required, like you can call it and it's fine.
I feel like that should be the case. I don't know if there's any. Like,
I've heard that. I've heard that's a thing.
Fact,
I'm not a TO though, so don't take my advice as gospel.
Right. I've seen some dicey calls, man. My favorite. This was off stream. This happened off stream. Another funny story. It was Kalamazoo versus KJH.
Nice.
So a Michigan duel off stream in losers at CEO. I want to say 2016 or 20. Must have been. Shit, it feels more recent than that. It might have been 2016 or 2017. One of the later CEOs. But this was one of the CEOs where like I want to say it was 2016 because Laudanus did well in this tournament and that was like his year or whatever. So, anyway, it's game 3, Fountain of Dreams. It's last stock, and KJH like Shine spikes Kalamazoo, like edge guards him successfully, and then like Kalamazoo goes to up B, but then KJH edge hogs him, and you know like how Peach like floats down very slowly in her umbrella, right?
Right,
Like
right.
so she's like KJH is hanging on the ledge, and like Kalamazoo's floating next to it. He's gonna grab on, but he's getting edge hogged. And so it's like, okay, KJH got there first. He's edge hogging. The game's over. And Kalamazoo like extends his hand for a handshake. And KJH is like, oh, a hand, and like goes to shake his hand. And because he goes to the handshake, he doesn't press the roll button. And the very end of like Fox running out of Legend Vuln, Peach's umbrella clips KJH, and Kalindi like falls off the ledge. Peach grabs the ledge, like, and then Kalindi's like, oh shit, and like he goes to recover, and then Kalamazoo edgeguards him and kills him.
No.
And I was watching the whole thing, and I was like, wait. And KJH immediately was like, wait. No. And Kyle was like, but you let go of the ledge, right?
But you're
and I was like,
at that point.
Yeah, you're kind of conceding, right? I feel like it's like there's a rule. I will add there's a precedent for this. In professional StarCraft, if you type GG, it is considered a forfeit in situations like that. Anyway, what we did, because we had the luxury of doing so, was we called Robin over because Jungle Guy was there, and we're like, well, we're all you guys are all Michigan. And fortunately, there was no bad it was more of a homie squabble, like. There wasn't going to be any bad blood over this because obviously Kyle and Kalindi are really good friends. And we called Robin over because he's like the Michigan arbiter of these sorts of things anyway. And Robin was like, ooh, yeah, that's a tough one, blah, blah, blah. We talked about it for a second. He's like, yeah, Kyle, if you extended your hand, man, yeah, you're conceding. And Kyle was like, all right, fine, fuck it. But it was really funny. Like, there was a moment where Kyle was like, all right, I'm going to try to grab him and see if this works.
That's classic Michigan for sure.
Yeah, it's classic Michigan for sure. Yeah, that's also the kind of thing where if it happened on stream, like today, like, oh my god, it would be such a big deal. Like,
it would be a pandemonium.
Such a big deal. It would be
absolutely canceled.
Absolutely canceled. Oh god, yeah. But it's just funny.
Now we just have to settle for Lucky Dark Atma.
Oh my god! That's not the first time. That wasn't the first time that's happened to Lucky. Lucky's done that exact thing before. There was that crew battle. It's on YouTube too. Like there was a crew battle.
The SoCal Boss Rush, right?
SoCal Boss Rush. He like KO'd Plump and then like side beat off stage.
He up-aired up the ledge, didn't he?
Up-aired up the ledge. Yeah. And it was like, dude, like, and there's other people in the crew battle. Like, it's not just you. Like, everyone else is like, what the fuck? That was one of our stocks. Hello, like. It's just like there's something about Lucky, man. I don't know what it is.
I will say, Lucky, I don't think he shows up here as someone who gets upset, oddly enough, even though there's like the Mr. F over Luckies of the world. He only shows up as someone who is doing an upset, I believe.
I think, honestly, with him and with Wes, I think there's players where it's just, okay, like, why is Swedish Armada such a big deal? It's a big deal because Armada doesn't get upset.
Yeah.
Like, Swedish Mango or Swedish, another god, even like, I don't know, Swedish PP or Swedish Plop or Leffen or something, I don't think would be nearly as high, right? Albert H-Box, same way. Like, Albert Mango would be like, yeah, whatever, like, that's, it's cool.
It'd be like Mango.
Like Magi Mango, exactly. Yeah. But like, like, think about like, all the times Mango, like, drop sets and pools, like Flipsy Mango.
You kind of cut off there. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, it really is up to who's getting upset as well as who is doing the upset. I think, it's both ways.
So if you value like being the sort of player that like people are like, whoa, this guy always makes lots of upsets. Like, I always say that I would rather be, me personally, I would rather be a guy that has big wins and big losses, because like Reddit and everybody, they remember the big wins, and like they'll make fun of you for the bad losses, but like if you've got thick enough skin, I think people tend to overrate players like that compared to like just solid performers all around that don't get big wins.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I don't think the MPGR people do that. I know that I super agree that like Reddit and like social media does that.
Sorry, in
But,
general, yes, agreed.
It's funny to think about this though, because I think Bobby Big Balls is a really fun example of this. Because I think that he was super low compared to where a lot of people were expecting him this year. And he's like the platonic ideal of like this player that you're describing, right?
Yes.
Where, like a lot of people was like, Bobby's so good, Bobby's so sick.
Bobby was actually.
So that's funny to think about.
He's a really interesting person to pick because I don't think. I mean, he's a good person at branding himself, and I think that leads to it just as well. But I don't really think he has those like huge, like super big wins. But, like he is a weird person because all of his records versus people who he plays multiple times are really good. And if he just plays someone like once, he could lose to them.
Yeah, it's so true.
Like
super duper true.
He does so well versus the MDVA PR, but if I were to see someone like Juicebox level play him in like winners round 2 of SmashCon or something,
It'd be terrifying.
I'm super scared if I'm a Bobby
To
fan.
this day, I think that one of Bobby's best performances ever was the National Arcadian, because that just felt like a super Bobby Destroyer tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was so surprised. Like, It feels like he like, and that's what happened to everybody. Everybody who people were like, yo, I think this person like has a real good shot at winning this tournament. Those guys all got blown up. Bimbo,
Bimbo
I still think Bimbo was probably correct to put as the 1 seed. He was the 1 seed, right?
Yeah, he was, I think.
Yeah, I think that was probably correct. I mean, he's really good. He's really consistent, but he got like 25th. And that was just how that tournament was for everybody. So the fact that like Bobby, who epitomizes like, oh boy, I could lose to anybody, at a tournament where anybody can beat anybody. Oh wow, you really won. Super weird. Yeah, but I was really, I mean, if anything, I was like extra proud of him for winning that tournament because of that very fact.
Yeah, like him versus Crudo, I think in grand finals was like, oh god, this could be really bad.
Well, he had to go through he had to go through Fizz to get there too, and I don't know if he had a lot of spacies in his bracket.
No, everyone was saying like, or people were saying that, you know, like if he gets matchups that he can do well in, you know, he gets Foxes and stuff, he'll eat them up, but he didn't really have to rely on that at all.
Yeah, which was kind of nuts.
Well, we're talking about players who, you know, they have big swings in terms of their big wins, and then maybe some not as great losses. And I want to get back to the bracket here because that's exactly how I view Lovage over Leffen. Like Lovage going into GTX, if you asked me before GTX, he was not top 100. He was like going to like Battle of BC and he was losing to like I don't even remember who he was losing to.
He lost to he lost to some pretty. He had some questionable losses there. I remember because I stayed with him. We talked about how he did, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't even know who I lost to, man."
It was not pretty. So going into this, he beats Bladewise, and I remember at the time being like, "That's huge."
That's a big deal.
I was like, "Wow!"
Like, people will be talking about this one forever.
I was like, "He is back," and then suddenly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we see something very interesting. Also, he lost to like Bodlak. He lost to Scallop.
Yeah.
Got 129th at Evo. He was someone who was very good the year before, and I think it's just one of those times you see people who they're good, and then they stop prioritizing Melee, and you see them drop off, and that is basically what I expected from Lovage. And then he burst in, and he ended up 3-stock in Leffen to win.
Yeah, it was weird. You can see in the camera that he
looks. The camera.
He turns around and he's looking at like Scar and Ben SW or something. He's like, "Yeah, I don't know what's going on."
He starts laughing. It's like, he's like, "This shouldn't be happening."
It's right. It you know, I think watching it too, it's definitely one of the weirdest upsets because you're watching it and you're just like, "This is so weird." It's so weird, like because. It feels at once like both an upset that means like, okay, so you know how we were talking about how on this Melee Stats bracket, the lower seeds are the ones that feel like just a little punctuated, you know, outlier in time or whatever.
Yeah.
And the higher seeds are like, oh shit, this is a big deal. It felt like both of those at the same time somehow, which was, you know what
absolutely.
I mean? because it was like, oh, and I don't know if that's just because we know who Lovage is and like he has history behind him and he's like a figure in the scene, like he commentates at Summit. Maybe that's what's going on there. Like maybe just the fact that he has legacy like makes us care about it a little more.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, I just remember being like, wow, this is like both such a big deal and not a big deal at all.
I mean,
Like, you're not going at you're not looking at that set like after that set. You're probably not sitting there thinking like, oh man, Leffen's gonna like place lower. Like you're like Leffen's probably gonna make a big losers run now. Like,
yeah. Well,
which
like,
I think is what happened. But
I believe he got like he lost to Plup, who lost to Amsa, and he got like 13th or something.
oh, okay, still right.
It
Didn't
was
lose too much.
it was a weird time in Leffen's history because I think that this was the time where people were ready to clown on him super hard for not being good. Like this was 2017. He was about to be ranked like 6th or something. Plup was going to be ranked over him for the first time, and I just think that like people were right in that mindset to, like anyone can be ready to do this with Leffen. I think Leffen's such a weird player where he's so endearing at times, and also just so like easily hateable from some. And when you're not good, the people who you could be endearing to, sometimes they just jump ship. So I think like we saw Leffen not as great as he usually is, and people are just clowning on him. And I think that this is like the pinnacle of that Leffen period. This is just like such a huge moment.
That sounds right. That really sounds right.
What do you guys think about that versus the other number 1 or number 2 seeds? Like, do you think? I guess even in general, what do you think about who could win this tournament? Because I think there's only a few ones that could. And I think that's definitely one.
So I think it's funny because if you look at like all of the other 1 seeds, at least from what I understand of all of them, is that they've got like huge asterisks.
They've got baggage, yeah.
Like the Silent Spectre Armada set is interesting because allegedly it was played on damage ratio 0.9, which I think helps Silent Spectre more than Armada. But it's an asterisk. Obviously, it like pulls into question the result. Albert Hungry Box was played on monitors, which also calls into like that probably also helps Hungry Box, but like.
Any time where it's something different than normal melee as we see it,
it's just an asterisk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. People are gonna value it differently.
Kage Mango, I heard rumors that Mango was drinking vodka out of a big gulp immediately before the tournament.
And it's also just old. Like if you compare that one's what 2010, and then the others that are number 1 seeds. I guess the Armada one's very old as well, but.
I'm gonna look at this bracket and I'm gonna say what I think are the most significant upsets on here for me. Well, actually, I'll say both for the community and for me. I think Kage Mango. If it was me, I think Kage Mango should win. Yeah, I don't know if Mango was drinking or whatever, but you got to realize that's what Mango did back then, and Mango just won.
Yeah.
Like I was in that like year and a half. I mean, that was the thing. It really got to this point where it was like, damn, this Mango dude just doesn't lose, and it felt like he couldn't lose. It almost felt like there was like an otherworldly force that would just prevent him from losing. I mean, yeah, like the conditions would be terrible and he would win. I mean, that was the whole thing with Genesis. Is like I won Genesis hungover, lol. So Kage Mango, like, yeah, that definitely I think was, like that was just the biggest, like most shocking upset I think at its time. Silent Spectre Armada is the other one that I could see beating it, and the only reason I see Silent Spectre Armada losing is because of that damage ratio thing. The thing is, though, we learned about that damage ratio. Like that asterisk, we learned about that very recently.
It was either 2018 or 2019. And
right.
Personally, I don't care. Like that doesn't really affect how big of an upset this is to me.
That's kind of how I feel.
Not to the point where like I'm gonna vote for anything else over for that reason alone.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I could see
people.
I could see some people like, given the fact that this is an open vote or whatever. I could see people voting against it for that reason, but like for me and for everyone at the time, like every good player and like every old head except for Armada himself, like probably doesn't care that much, and like a lot of like what makes an upset special or important is like it in its time, like it weighed against its contemporaries, or like it taken into context, like everything that was going on at the time and like the state of Melee at the time. And so because of that, us learning about the damage ratio thing or whatever in 2018 or 2019, like I just think it's like that upset has been so culturally important for so long that I just don't see it hurting it very much. So those two I think have a really, really good shot. I think
I
those are
agree.
the
These
two.
are my top 2 seeds as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Personally, I think Kage Mango is a huge thing. In my heart of hearts, just because I was not around for it, I would probably vote for Lovage Leffen if it came down to those two. But I think you're right. I think all the top 4 seeds I think are super strong, and the fact that Albert H-Box is probably the least strong in my mind just shows like how far and away different these upsets are than the ones that follow it.
Yeah.
Are there any that you guys don't see as number 1 seeds that you think can make big upsets or can make like large runs?
Yeah. I have two that I see that. Well, I mean, and again, I don't know how much of this is like this is the era I came up in. I'm sure there's some of that bias going into it. Two that I think are underseeded are well, again, like, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Like it's probably just me being, biased in a way or whatever, but I'm surprised to see Zoo over Mewtwo King as low as it is. And I think Mewtwo King, like the story of that, I think if Zoo over, like, let me put it to you another way. If Armada didn't get second at Genesis 1, like, Armada stole the show at Genesis 1, right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, like, Mango Armada was the story of Genesis 1, but, like, and Mewtwo King, like, going into Genesis, most top players at the time thought it was going to be the first real significant clash of Mango versus Mewtwo King, playing their mains, like none of this Mewtwo King Falcon nonsense. Like that was what people thought. I mean, that was like the seeds or whatever. Like it was like Mango Mewtwo King, like East Coast versus West Coast. ROM was weird because like Mewtwo King like johned and like, whatever happened and went Falcon and all this nonsense. Complained about, I don't know what it was, like his control or something. And it was like,
Sounds
this is
right,
going to
yeah.
be right. Mewtwo King is like, and Mewtwo King was still like, solidly ranked 2, right? And also he just didn't lose to Spaceys. Like it was like Shiz versus Mewtwo King, like legendary set, but Shiz lost.
Yeah.
But and then Zoo like came along and just like beat him in a Spaceys versus Mewtwo King set, which again there was never like Falco doesn't beat Mewtwo King. And like knocked him out of the knocked him out of
Yeah, that was
knocked
losers
him out of
because
the
he
tournament.
lost
That
to
was
Armada
losers.
and winners.
Lost to Armada and winners, yeah. And so it was like, and it was deep. It was like in top 8, right? So it was that was and I mean, like, I having been there, like the venue exploded. Like, Zoo crowd surfed. Like Taj was like near the stage, and Taj like picked him up, and like there was a big crowd, and like Zoo like he picked him up and put him on the crowd, and like we crowd surfed Zoo. Like it was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And like people were talking about this for a long time. So I'm surprised personally to see it at 7th. If nothing else, like the in-person reaction, I think would justify, like seating it higher or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that the way that you put this at higher than 7. I think it's comparable to the way that like a lot of people view the S2J M2K set that happened at Shine, where everyone raised their chairs.
Yeah.
I think that set was quite a bit worse than this one, actually.
Agreed.
But I think that like there's this attachment in people's minds of the set because of that like really hilarious in venue moment that happened, right?
Yeah. Stuff like that
yeah.
matters. Stuff like
Agreed,
that does matter. Yeah.
I mean,
I personally think that this is going to beat Swedish Armada, unless people super overvalue this fake streak that I don't believe in.
You really think that's going to beat Zoo Mewtwo King?
I think it should.
I
think it should. That's all I'll say about it. It's like
I think it could.
I think so. We did put it at 7th, and I think that it's important to understand that there's no real once you get past the top 2 seeds or whatever. It just becomes what you value, and if you value how important it is, or if you value what the current mindset towards it is. Because, if you just ask Melee Stats to rank the top 64 best upsets of all time, it would not look like this 1-to-1.
Yeah.
Because, this is something that people are voting on, so they have to know it as well. And I don't know. I don't know if Zoo Mewtwo King has stood the test of time for results like that from that era.
I don't know. So here's my take. Here's why I think it has, right? The Swedish breaking Armada streak, it's not real. Armada streak was broken twice, right? Armada didn't beat anyone that wasn't a god until Leffen came along. And then Armada didn't beat anyone who wasn't a god or Leffen until Plup came along.
Club came along. Yeah.
And then Armada didn't lose to any god who wasn't, or Leffen or Plup. Yeah. And then Swedish came along, and people were like, okay, well, Swedish probably won't become a top 7 player. So I think the streak is officially over for like the 5th time. But
that's true. That's
it's
totally
best
true.
of 3 set. It was at Evo, it wasn't in top 8. Like there's nothing behind it other than this fake streak. I'm not a fan.
I understand where you're coming from. I do understand where you're coming from.
I get that too. And I before he even lost to Swedish, I was very mad about the streak. I remember being a young man on Smash Reddit and complaining about how he already lost the streak. He lost it to Leffen. No one cared because he was quote unquote retired and it was in Europe. Like, he already lost the streak even when Leffen wasn't a top 5 to 6 player. But yeah, I think you're totally right. Like, that streak doesn't really mean as much considering he was losing to people who weren't gods. We just kind of kept pushing the goalposts for that. But I don't know. I think it's so important to a lot of people that I don't think that it will lose to Zoom Mewtwo King. Oddly enough, I don't know.
I just think that's a tragedy because the Z Mewtwo King set.
Do you think it loses to Zane Plup if it makes it?
It might lose to Zane Plup.
It might lose to Zane Plup. God, I didn't think about that. That's so depressing.
Yeah, we'll see, man. I mean, for what it's worth, I think Javi PP is.
I'm definitely voting for Javi PP.
Yeah.
1,000%.
I think I underrated.
I recognize him on Fox main, so.
I underrated Javi PP in terms of how the community liked it because I just think that it's something that is so unique to the time. 2 players who don't play anymore, even though we know both of them, and I think it's really hard to grasp just how, bursting from nowhere Javi was.
Oh yeah, he came out of nowhere. Like no one. That was his first tournament in the U.S.
I think it's hard for people to grasp that now, just considering we've known him as a top 25 player for a little bit
for so long. Yeah.
That I thought it had a chance to lose to Smucker Zane, to be honest, but it won pretty handily. So who knows? I could just be underrating how the community views it.
Again, right? It's like how we would put it versus like how the dilettante would put it, and I think it's very different. Because people just have not been around for around for as long. But at the time, I mean, let me tell. The thing is, I think there's there's 2 sides of that though, right? Because like Reddit loves, or Reddit's biased towards newer stuff, whatever, blah blah blah. That's natural. But Reddit also loves PP. So like that alone, honestly, and yeah, you got to realize we throw around the 5 gods thing or whatever, like it's nothing these days. I mean, obviously, a lot of those players don't play anymore, or aren't, there's Zane, there's this whole new era, but at that time, I mean, someone coming out of nowhere, upsetting PP, PP was just really, really, really good. He didn't lose to people that weren't Mango, and sometimes HBox, and sometimes Mewtwo King.
I think it just goes to show what does at that time mean to people who were not around at that time. And I think that goes for so many things that are on here. And I think that there's, we only saw one upset in the bracket so far, one day in. We saw Sastifer over Ken, lost to Chillin' over Mewtwo King, which both old head-to-head results.
Old school, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see, would Sastifer over Ken lose to another 12, 13 seed that was newer that people remember? It'll be interesting. That's one of the cool things to see going into the bracket is are the newer things stuff that people care about more. One thing I am looking at, and it'll be something that we are going to see the results of pretty soon. Pew Pew versus Hungrybox and Abate over S2J. I think are 2 super. I don't want to call them memey results, but it's results that the community has not forgotten about for better or worse, and they're going up head to head.
Mm-hmm.
It's Pew Pew versus Hungrybox was the reason why we had to hear about how Pew Pew could take a set from Hungrybox every time he played for 5 years.
It's true. It's true.
And Abate S2J, we saw Abate had this big run. He beat Axe at that run, I believe. He beat Duck, I think. But the thing that people remember, it's the invisible ceiling.
Mm-hmm. It's just such an iconic moment.
For sure. I mean, we actually ranked that as a more iconic moment on last year's most memorable moments bracket. I think it was like an 8 seed, and now it's a 10 seed as an upset. But I think it's like something that means more to Melee than it does for that specific bracket, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting. Fares. It's interesting that you bring up the other bracket, because I think that the other bracket, the way that it went, it kind of makes me really wonder how this bracket is going to progress, because I super did not predict anything at all in that bracket. Like, people voted for the weirdest things. Like, I remember like the meditation 4-stock thing. People, like that made it like all the way to finals.
People really liked that.
And like Armada didn't even win that set, did he? Like, it was really weird that like people were so into that specific thing. But like, I don't know, the people on the internet care about the weirdest moments, so it'll be really interesting to see how people vote. Cause
I think, I mean, if you ever want to like, you know, kind of break this down, or like, you know, you want to try to figure out why people care about the things they care about, just like, you just got to realize, like, it's all marketing. And I mean that I don't mean that in like the intentional sense. I just mean like tips that, like, you know, like determine why like stuff blows up or goes viral, or like memes happen. It's like the same. I think it's the same forces fundamentally, right? Like the things that make us care about shit, like the memes that propagate and the ways they propagate, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's really interesting to look at how that deals with this bracket. You know, last year's bracket is the best Melee moment. And what is the best Melee moment? Is that the most impressive Melee moment? Is it the most memorable? So I think like what means more to the community, that factors into that a lot larger than it does right now. Because this is like best upset. And does that mean like the coolest upset? Does that mean the upset that had the coolest moment? Or is it like the biggest skill gap? Is it the most impressive thing? So it's interesting to see how that might kind of find its way into this one. Also, another thing that I think is going to be cool to watch in terms of this bracket versus the last one. The last one, everyone was playing for second place, right? Like, we asked what was the greatest Melee moment of all time, and included the Wombo combo.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? But this one, I don't think any of the number 1 seeds are far and away contenders to.
Oh yeah, I think top 8 is going to be really interesting.
Yeah. I can even pull up, you know, we had the what's it called, the finals from last year. I believe I think it won like 80%. Actually, so Wombo Combo won with 60%, 62% over Axis 4-stock. Like that is something that I don't know. I think if we have 2 upsets going into each other in grand finals, I don't think it's 60-40. I think we're going to see like 52-48 or something. I think that the ones that are happening, I think they're all so close to each other. And that's why I think that this is more interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm. You think, hang on a minute, circling back to that though.
I had a lot of thoughts there.
You think Axe Silent Wolf is, you know, a bigger moment or a less big moment than the Wombo Combo?
No, I think Wombo Combo is a huge moment. And I think that like we knew going into it that was going to be number 1. And if it wasn't, it was just like a contrarian take from people, right? There's people who are like, no, this thing that I saw, you know, 100 times before I knew about Melee is not the biggest moment.
That's no, I'm with you there. I agree with that. I think that like it's the same. It's like that. It's the viral forces, man. Like if you've got a soundbite that's put on every, like, you know, bullshit Call of Duty 360 no scope montage, like that everyone knows about, that has millions of views, like that is part of like League of Legends parlance. Like, I don't care that it happened at some, you know, like Joe Schmo NorCal local, like you know, it's just like what do you know, if that's not iconic, what is, kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also just think that it was very Melee, right? Like, just like the idea that it was like this no-name NorCal local, and the entire venue just blowing up, even though it's like completely meaningless, and it's like,
I want more of that to happen today. I want, you know, the next whatever New England local or Hacks nightclub to just have, some wild explosive thing happen where Smuckers does some shit and hacks, I don't know, freaks the fuck out because he's commentating and like it goes viral. Like I want more of that. Like I don't care that it's not at top 8 of some major. Like I think we need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's all net play tournaments.
I mean,
maybe for a bit.
Maybe there's some potential there, man. I don't know.
Who knows?
I'm less okay with the new Wombo combo coming from a net play set.
Yeah, it's true.
Wouldn't that be such a weird thing if literally the coolest thing to ever happen in the game was like loser semis of this net play tournament?
Well,
I'd
yeah.
be very.
It'd be a sign of the times. It would be a sign of the times.
I'd be
like,
very
definitely.
conflicted.
Yeah.
Just a new thing that opens your mind. It's like how you think you know everything, and then just suddenly something completely changes it all. But it just happens to happen at a net play tournament. We should have included one net play result in here. That would have been hilarious.
And we already have a net play result, dude. It's the first seed.
We have a number 1 seed. Well, I guess we should get down to it. We're running on an hour right now. What do you guys select as your pick? I said that my pick. I'm picking Lovage Leffen. Is it the greatest? I don't know, but it's close enough where I'm able to throw in my own little feelings towards it, and just something about it so weird, so funny, and just has this special connection to just like you mentioned earlier, like it has this different aspect to it that the others don't, and I'm picking that for mine. What about you guys? Toph, what do you think is your number 1 pick? What's your pick?
Yeah, I want to say Wheat. I think that, like, first of all, I want to say that I'm going to echo what you just said, and I'm going to say that, like, I think people voting in this should do exactly that, and they should. I want to see what people care about. Like, I don't want people to vote based on, like, what they think the intellectual or, like, quote-unquote correct choices. Like, I want to see what people care about emotionally, like, what was important to them coming up or whatever. Like, I think that actually makes it more interesting, not less. That being said, and well, yeah, for that reason, though, as well as the quote unquote correctness part, I think those actually both coincide for me, and I do think Kage Mango probably would be my pick, and if not, it would be Silent Spectre Armada.
The beautiful thing is that there's no wrong picks, right? I mean,
Right.
If you're picking from like I guess you could pick like Ringler over La Luna, and you could say, well, that's the greatest upset of all time, and I'd probably say that's wrong.
Probably say that's wrong.
But like, there are so many good ones here that I think like no one should be ashamed if they're like, yeah, Javi over PP is the best upset of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're
Totally.
totally agree. People should not think about like what is the correct thing to do, what is the smart thing. Like, oh, actually, this person was greater discrepancy in their ranks. No, it's all about how you feel. Like, what did you like most? And Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
So I guess I'm sort of torn between two, right? So like a heart pick and a soul pick, right? And like deep down in my heart, I definitely think that Kage Manga is definitely the most psycho upset of all time. I definitely think that it deserves to win this bracket, and I will probably be voting for it every single time I get the opportunity to. But just like my gut-wrenching soul reaction is absolutely Prince Abu over Pluck. I just think that it's so fucked up. It's the most insane set, I think, in the entirety of Melee history.
Oh yeah, that was a weird fucking set.
I just remember game one, Pluck getting hit 0 times in 3 stocks.
Game 1 was faster than the Axe versus Silent Wolf.
Yeah, and you said this afterwards. You were commentating it, and you were like, I think this was the most brutal one-sided match in EVO history.
Yeah.
And then he lost.
Yeah, he lost.
Like, it's just like, there's nothing about that set that makes sense. And I think that my gut reaction is I want Prince Beautiful to win so badly. Set. I think it should have been at least a 2 seed.
No.
It was the most.
I'd be happy with that. I don't think it should have been a 2 seed.
I don't think so.
Fairly, but I'd be happy with it.
It's such a funny set. It reminds me of was it Genesis 5 where Lucky beat Zayn? Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And everyone was like, how did Lucky win this? It's like Zayn, I feel like Zayn lost the set 3-1. Like he won 3 games and lost the set. That's how it felt. And I feel similarly when I watch Plup versus Prince Abu. I'm like, I think Plup just won this set, but he lost 2 games of 3.
Yeah, it was wild.
It was
I just
such
remember
a weird thing to watch.
I just remember the time that he up Bs to Randall, and he thinks that he dies, so he closes his eyes and takes like a big breath. And then Prince Abu goes to hit him and misses, and and Plump is still closing his eyes and breathing, and then Prince Abu does double jump back air and then kills him off of it, and then like turns to Plump and the player cam. Oh my god, it was so funny.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to watch that set if they haven't seen it.
I do. That is a very good pick. Like, I don't know if that's like I said, there's no wrong picks, but that is definitely something that I don't think a lot of people will say, which is good. You know, it's all about being unique, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what people say, and I hope that, yeah, like 100% Toph, what you said. I hope people vote thinking about what they like, and I hope to hear people talk about why some Mewtwo King was the thing that they cared about more than any of the quote unquote better upsets or whatever. It's because there's a lot of really cool stuff here, and like at the time, the cool thing is that almost all of these were like mind blowing.
Definitely. Even maybe especially Ringler La Luna. My mind was blown.
Mind blown for different reasons, perhaps.
For
but
different
all
reasons.
mind blowing.
I am in the background of that VOD losing my shit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's something.
Yeah, it was it was something that I got up immediately and I had to tell the nearest person who I knew. I was like, Luna's out at 65th, losing to Ringler. I had to tell like whoever was closest to me. They had to know.
What was that main stage? What turn was that?
That was main stage. He lost to Umarth and Ringler for 65th. The same place he got an ultimate.
Yeah. I think I got 65th in ultimate at that tournament. And I may have done better in Melee. Yeah, no. I mean, honestly, right? Like, I remember that. And I remember the immediate reaction of everyone around me. I was hanging out with like Vish and some other people. And the immediate reaction of everyone around me was like, oh man, that sucks for La Luna. Like there was no excitement for Ringler. It was like, poor guy, like that sucks. Not even like for a moment. It wasn't even like, oh, that's really interesting. But poor La Luna. It was just like, poor La Luna.
When we did our Shine podcast, I said that same exact thing about A Rookie versus Calvar. You know, whatever you know about A Rookie versus Calvar, the players themselves or the beef that goes into it, completely divorced from all that. I just don't want to see a mid tier beating a high tier. I'm that far in Melee where I just don't want to see a Mario beat a Marth, and it's probably the same thing.
I didn't even realize that was the thing.
They met in bracket and they did like a $500 money match.
They had
oh my god,
they had a ton of beef going into it, which I think was really random. It was like because.
Yeah, if you told me, that like A Rookie versus Calvar might have beef or whatever, like, I don't know.
The weird thing
in this day and age,
it started in the replies of a Mango tweet. I think I don't think it was like.
Yeah, the story behind this is like Mango lost to Hungrybox at some big tournament, and he's like, "I'm such a disappointment." He did one of the emo tweets. Okay. And A Rookie like replied to Mango's tweet because apparently they have beef, and he was like, "Yes, you are a disappointment."
Whoa!
And then Calvar was like, "Yo, what the fuck?"
So Calvar was a Team Mango in this exchange?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
They just start going at it in the replies here, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you telling me this story, but only because I like trust you as a person. Like. I'm just having to take your word for it.
It's so wild. Like, the funniest thing about this is, if you, the listener, if you know anything about the political leanings of A Rookie and Calvar, it could seem like they would be in a clash, and that would be the very...
It's not even that.
No, it's not
like the very obvious thing. It's not. It's just like some super random... Mango said he's bad. A Rookie's like, you are. And then Calvar had to, like, he had to, like, fight for them, like, Oberyn Martell or whatever.
God, that is so weird.
What a weird time. one thing. So we're coming up to the end of the episode. So let's talk about like what do we think might make it far. What do we kind of think might not make it far? Because I've got one that I really do like personally. That I think probably is dead in the water if it meets the one that's going up against next. None
You just
versus
mean relative to the bracket, yeah.
yeah. So None versus Mango is the 5th seed. That plays Wizzy HBox at What the Fox too. I think that has it really easy. And if it plays that, it's going to most likely play Professor Pro over HBox at Paragon, which I think is hilarious. Because
I think it's hilarious too, yeah.
they played in PM and they played in Melee. And Hungrybox won in PM, and Prof won in Melee.
That's
yeah, and to be clear, HBox beating Prof in PM is as big of an upset as Prof beating HBox in Melee in 3.02. Like, far and away. Like, HBox...
Yeah, I remember that era. Prof was disgusting.
HBox was, like, solidly a top 30, maybe, player, which is, like, exactly where Prof was in Melee. And Prof was, like, really good. Like top 5.
Yeah, that was when everyone was saying, "Oh, the PM player." I didn't know he played.
Yeah, Prof hated that. Prof was just,
Prof. Yeah,
he hated it so bad.
He said he liked it insofar as like, well, people fly me out to stuff, and then I get to enter Melee there, and I was like, word. That was actually at that tournament was when he told me that.
That's awesome.
Paragon. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think that even with all the history there, people love None. Mango didn't lose to a Falcon for such a long time. I think that's a pretty big result. Even if personally at the time I didn't feel it was crazy, just because I think that it wasn't going to happen again. Like when I saw it, I was like, okay, like that's really good for None. But I think that that's probably going to beat Prof Hungrybox, unfortunately. What do you guys see when looking at this bracket that you think can maybe make a couple upsets, maybe make a long run, or maybe a high seed that you think won't get its due?
Looking at the bracket itself,
I think Duo X gets robbed. That's my read.
Really?
Anyone who knows me, I think it will get robbed. I think that Amsa Hungrybox will beat it.
It is up against 2 Hungrybox sets where he lost, which people do like.
Yeah,
people really like
it. It's a really difficult bracket for R2D2 over X, IMO.
Yeah,
but I think it's a great set. So
I think Bomb Soldier over Captain Jack, that's a 4 seed, and I don't think it's got a good. Well,
any of the old stuff too. If there's a good old set, there's like a really real chance that it just like loses in round 1.
I don't.
It's
think
like
it
it's like how old
Wizzy.
school players are.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Axe over HBox, as it's like most likely the person who plays next round is a weird one. Because Axe over HBox in terms of MLG Anaheim 2014, like how big of an upset that was. I don't know if it's maybe a 5th seed of all time, but Edwin and I really looked into just how much Axe gets beaten down by HBox, and the fact that this is like the 1 of the 1-22 record with him.
Mm-hmm.
So we said it's a 5th seed. I don't know if that necessarily is super threatening to Bomb Soldier.
Yeah, I don't know if Bomb Soldier or Captain Jack's gonna beat Nico over Wizrobe. I legitimately think it could lose in round 1.
I don't think so. People love Bomb Soldier. Like, maybe they don't love him for his specific win over Captain Jack, but people do like the story, and whenever people post, like, oh, Bomb Soldier's playing Ultimate with Amsa or whatever, people do like that.
Yeah, it's true.
That's fair.
I think he, like, the next threat that he has, I think he loses to. I just don't know if Axe over HBox is, like, a threat big enough.
That's fair.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty good wrap of everything. We all mentioned our top picks. We mentioned stuff that we thought could make it far. Anything else that anyone wants to say about this?
No, I'm just looking forward to the results, man.
Awesome.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting seeing how this plays out, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what I was mentioning. I think that we really don't know who's going to win. We don't know who's going to make it to the Final Four. We don't know who's going to make it to the finals. I think this should be a really interesting bracket, and I hope that all the listeners play along. And if you want to do so, voting is going to be happening each weekday in the Melee Stats Podcast Discord server. You can jump into there through the link in the description, and we'll be tweeting it out during days with voting. You can follow us on twitter.com/melee-stats-pod to find those. You can follow my lovely guests here at Toph_BBQ, right? Underscore?
You got it.
Whew. And Ambisinister _.
Yep.
Anything else you guys want to plug at the time? Anything coming up during this?
Anything else? Yeah. I mean, I might as well take this opportunity. I am going to start streaming probably close to every day. I'm actually just waiting on some stream assets to come in that I need, but I'm actually going to be creating a lot of content during this time. And we've got some. I don't know how much I should reveal right now, but the MIOM team, we're putting something together for some melee entertainment during lockdown. Yeah, melee during coronavirus. So I actually have some stuff that I'm kind of cooking up. Yeah.
We're finally getting the NetPlay Top 100.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, I'm sure I'll be tweeting about it a lot. So just pay attention to my Twitter, I guess, and yeah.
For sure. Well, I hope you become the next Ludwig.
Yeah. Let's just say yes and move on.
Ambi, do you have anything coming up? Do you have any more energy drink tier lists?
I'll probably be putting out a lot of very unrelated to each other type of content. So if you want to follow me and get my latest thoughts on the relative merits of different energy drinks.
I do.
I'm thinking about making some more video stuff, so hopefully that's coming on. But otherwise, not really anything to plug. Stay inside. Don't go outside. Please don't go outside.
I think that is, yeah. I mean, I don't know how much we have to tell the people who made it all the way to the end of this episode.
That's a good point.
I'm sure they're like, yeah, we weren't thinking about it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the people who listen to the podcast, and we will be trying to release this content regularly. Even though we are a podcast that has done a lot of melee results talk and not a lot of melee results to talk about, it's pretty important that we continue melee during all of this. And our love for melee obviously is not gone, so why would we go away? So we should be creating some content for the next coming weeks. And if you want to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/melee-stats. We have this podcast. We have stuff like Melee Madness, Monday Morning Marth, just stuff like that. And any little bit does truly help. So I think that basically should be it. I really appreciate both of you being on this episode. It was really, Ambi, it's always a delight when you're on. And Toph, first time guest, I had a great time. I really appreciate it.
I had a great time as well, man. No, I mean, the pleasure's mine. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, yeah. And, we're basically at the end of it. I think that I just want to say, yeah, go follow us on Twitter. Don't forget to vote because I really
and also vote for the melee stats bracket.
Yeah. That's what I meant, but hey, you know what? Vote for whatever you could vote for, I guess. A very pro-voting stance that I'll take. All right, well, that is about the end of it. Oh no, our outro song is corrupted. Well, in that case, there's no outro song. For Melee Stats, I am Gimme That Wheat. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Good night.